The Fountain of Youth was something Ponce de Leon searched for in Florida. He never really found it, although in St. Augustine there's a place that they call the Fountain of Youth because it's a fountain he found. It doesn't make you younger, but you can pay about $20 to go see it, which, hey, helps somebody. What Ponce de Leon thought was he could find what would make the Fountain of Youth forever young, and it was kind of a big conspiracy theory of that day. A bunch of people believed it. A bunch of people were out looking for it. In fact, today, people are still looking for a Fountain of Youth. They're going all out to try and stay young. You hear things about makeup and working out and surgery and more surgery and then another surgery. Some people, it gets a little weird when they do all the surgeries. And it's funny because they may look younger, but they're still the same age. It doesn't change their age. And it's funny about men, we joke about women wanting to look young, but there's a lot of guys out there, they're doing the same thing. They're doing all the routines, and everybody wants to know, what does Tom Cruise do? Because he obviously stays looking young. But the deal is, looking young, being young, acting young, those are all different things. And what we want to do is understand looking young is fine. The problem, though, is a lot of men still act young. Now, I'm not saying that having a youthful spirit isn't a bad thing. Having a desire to learn new things and energy like you're young, those are great. The problem is the guys who are still acting like they're teenagers, and they're not. They're grown men, they're adults, but they're still acting like children. It's like they never stopped aging at some point in their life. And really, that's exactly what happened to many of them. There's some big reasons why men sometimes never grow up. Something happens inside of them and they kind of stop aging. And we're going to find out what those things are on today's show. So let's jump in.
Welcome to the Confident Man Podcast, empowering men with the confidence they need to live their adventure. Now, here is your host, David Maxwell.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me today on the Confident Man Podcast. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you wanting to be a better man. Well, today we're going to be talking about why some men never grow up. Now understand, this is not a man-bashing podcast. A lot of podcasts out there, all they do is bash men. And they're sitting there talking about how terrible men are and all this other stuff. I believe in men. I believe in their design, their ability to lead themselves, the others, society. And that's why we want to help men get better. But this podcast is designed to be a mirror, to sometimes show guys the reality of their life, where they're at, what's going on with them. You see, the design of men is a powerful one. Every man can be a powerful man. Look at history. Men fought wars. Men invented new things. Men, even today, run major corporations, countries, but they also play in the playground with their kids. And there's a lot of development that happens because men can do both. Men can play with their kids and have that kid's function, that kid's style, but they can also be very serious and do things like win wars and run countries. That's what makes us men. And men have a natural play instinct that's good. It's good for them. It helps them develop. It helps them connect with their kids. In fact, play is one of the number one ways dads connect with their children, by playing with them, by doing activities with them. The problem is that some men never develop that maturity aspect and stay in the play aspect. Play is a part of every man, but you don't want to stay a child in what you do. You want to mature. Now, what is real maturity? Maturity is not the lack of play. It's not that you don't have fun anymore in life. It's that you know the appropriate time to do it. You know when to play and when to be serious. A lot of men don't know this. A lot of men are still living like they're teenagers. They're older in age, but emotionally, they're still very young. And that's not good. And we want to deal with that today. And so this is an episode not to give men an excuse. I'm not here to excuse you. I'm here to be a mirror to help you take responsibility. Men have got to take responsibility. The only one who can force a man to grow up is that man himself. No one can make a man do anything. A man's got to want it. And I want to challenge you that you have to want to grow up. You have to see something in your life that's not right and say, you know what? It's time I fix that. It's time I do something about that. So we're going to look at the main reasons a lot of men aren't growing up today. These are some of the big reasons. And I believe that when men recognize this and start to bring a change, it will make them better men. It also will help men learn how to take leadership roles in their home, about themselves, their families, their society, their community. So we want to deal with all that. And the three big excuses men have for not growing up, the reasons they're not growing up, is one, a lack of examples, two, a lack of ingredients, and three, a lack of challenges. The first reason many men never grow up is just a lack of examples. Some men grew up kind of on their own, and they never got to see what a grown man is supposed to act like, what he's supposed to do. And then other guys, they've kind of grown up in confusing times. The feminist movement has been very hostile toward men, and society as a whole has kind of taken on that just beat up the man kind of thing, putting men down, saying they don't need them. You know, there's the old saying, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. And what that does is it causes a lot of men to kind of back off and not try to be strong. They don't know who they are as men, so it kind of effeminizes men. So men don't know how to be good leaders. And the problem with that is those good men back off, and the extremes of manhood are what people see. They can become very feminine-like, or they can become very hyper-masculine and not care about anyone but themselves and be very selfish and self-centered. And so a lot of guys, they become players. They just kind of use women because those women prove to the man, I'm a man, because they don't have any other example. They don't know what to do. And then the others have just backed off, and they kind of stay away from trying to even be masculine. So they kind of deny their own masculinity. And I'm not saying every guy has to be some tough guy or anything like that, but every man has masculine traits that he wants to bring out. But a lot of times society tells them, no, you need to put those down. You need to stop doing that. And this beat down of masculinity has a lot of men confused, and they don't really know how to be men. So they don't know how to be dads. So it kind of perpetuates that lack of example. Because if a man grows up with no example and then he becomes a dad, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to be a dad. And so he's trying to raise boys, but he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to train them unless he takes the time to figure it out. That's why you see so many dads connecting with their kids through sports, which that's kind of a natural thing for men anyway. Men connect with their kids through activities, sports being an activity, it's a normal one. But some fathers, that's the only way they know how to connect to their kids. That's the only way they know how to do it. It's the only way they can even pass on a few masculine traits is through sports, because they don't know what they're doing because they didn't have an example. So a lot of guys are out there just kind of wandering around, trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a man? How do I act like a man? What do I do? They don't really know where they're going, so they don't know what to do. It reminds me of an Alice in Wonderland quote that I thought was very good, and it kind of fits a lot of situations, but it fits where a lot of men are today. And it starts with her talking to the cat, and she says this, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the cat. "I don't care much where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. And the cat said, "Oh, you're sure to do that if you only walk long enough." And I think that's how a lot of men are approaching it. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're doing. And they're just kind of like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to try the other. And they're just trying things, not really having a direction for their life or for how they parent the next generation, how to be a dad. You see, a lot of guys don't know because they didn't have that example. Now, single moms, a lot of them are doing their best and they're working hard and they're trying to be everything, but they're single moms. They're not dads. They miss out. The kids miss out on having a dad in their life, and they need a dad, just like kids need a mom. They need both. That's why we have both together, moms and dads, because the kids need the example of both to help them be well-rounded. But a lot of boys have grown up with no dad, no male example. And boys need men in their life. They need men to teach them. They need men to train them. And a lot of these boys have grown up. And so now their dad's trying to figure it out as they go. And a lot of them don't even know they're missing something. They think they're fine, but they're missing something. There's something on the inside. And that's why this older generation of men has got to do something to help the next generation. If you're an older man, I challenge you, help the next generation. Don't just sit back and complain and whine about them. Start investing in them. Start spending time in them. You can whine about it or you can do something about it. They need you to do something about it. Now, for young men, if you realize you're missing something, then you've got to put in the extra work. And you say, well, I don't want to do extra work. Well, then you're going to miss out. Because in order to man up, in order to be a man, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to start reading, find coaching, find mentors. You're going to have to do that extra work while fulfilling your roles at your work, at your home, and all the things you do. Yes, it's extra work, but it's what we do. We're men. We do the work. And I promise you, it's truly worth it. And what it'll do is help you build a foundation so you'll be a better example. You'll live a better life as a man. You'll be a better dad to your children. And you'll be able to give your children what you didn't have. A good example that they can then pass on to their children and will change the legacy of what happens to young men in our society today. The second reason why some men never grow up is a lack of ingredients. Some guys have not grown up just because they lack some of the things in their life that they need. They don't have the ingredients to mature. Now, this isn't a way to give them a way to blame or to put things out, but men need to recognize this. If they're missing something in their life, if something is wrong, they need to see it. If they never see it, they can never try to fix it. And what we want to do is help men see that the ingredients are missing so they can go about trying to fix it in their life. What can I do to get better? If they don't recognize the problem, they can't fix it. And men still have to take responsibility for themselves. That's a key point in this. All of these things are not to give them an excuse, but it's to show them where they need to work, what they need to do. Just like if you go to the gym, there's mirrors all around. Well, the reason there's mirrors is to help guys see what they want to work on. They may be overdeveloped in one part of their body and underdeveloped in another. And a mirror shows them that. If they don't have the mirror, they don't know that. Some men are missing key ingredients in their life. Something happened in their life that caused them to skip out on some ingredients they need to mature, and they need to fix it. Now, a number of men have had different things happen to them. And these things cause them to kind of stop growing emotionally. We're going to cover a few of them right now. One of the first areas is divorce. Divorce is a reality that many men have dealt with when they were kids. Their parents divorced. That's devastating. It's a very hard one to go through, and it often causes boys to react in negative ways, sometimes violently, sometimes anger, sometimes they back off in life. And for some kids, that divorce is very hard on them emotionally, so they kind of stop growing emotionally. They stop moving ahead. So if you've had divorce in your background and you thought, well, it didn't really affect me, it didn't bother me, I would revisit that and check and see. Maybe it affected you more than you realize. Another one, and one of the hardest for children to overcome as they become adults, for men, is the addictive nature of pornography. When boys are exposed to porn at a young age, it's like it puts clamps in their life and just pulls on them throughout their life. They're affected very much emotionally by it. They stop growing emotionally at the age they start looking at porn. And that can lodge in their life. And it causes them to grow as men, but they're still emotionally at the same age when they started looking at that porn. They don't know how to deal with things. So what we have to understand is the pornography now, with the plethora of it, it's everywhere. People are getting it very easily. It's going into weirder and weirder situations. It takes the men there, and the men have to fight against it. They may always have a weakness toward it, but they need to understand that, and they need to put steps in their life to fight it, to try and overcome it, so that loss doesn't hurt them in their life. It doesn't cause them to lose out on other stuff. Another area that we don't really talk about a lot today is sexual abuse. The statistics show that the boys being sexually abused is getting higher and higher. It's always been a higher number for girls, but the boys' number is moving up. So boys are finding themselves being sexually abused. And unfortunately, a lot of that sexual abuse is boy to boy or man to boy. And that's the big problem, because what that does is that really messes with a boy's mind. It messes with his psyche. What happened? A guy came after me. Does that mean I'm gay? Does that mean, this is my life? Are men attracted to me? And that'll really mess a boy up. And some guys have had that happen, so they spend their whole life trying to prove their manhood based on an abuse situation, or they carry guilt or shame. And if that's happened to you, you need to deal with it. You need to understand it wasn't nothing. It wasn't something just to move past. And a lot of guys, if they had the abuse happen, then they get into the pornography scene. That really messes them up. It causes them to never really mature, never really grow up, and kind of spend their whole life trying to figure out what life is all about. And a lot of these guys are hurting the next generation because they just don't know what to do with themselves. Another one that a lot of guys have gone through is bullying. Bullying can stop you from emotionally growing because you're going through a really hard time. A lot of men get a skewed view of life when they go through bullying. They often develop a hardness. They get that attitude that I guarantee I'm not going to be bullied again. No one's going to hurt me. And what they do is they kind of build a shell that keeps them from being able to get close to people. So they have this walled off self that happened when they were maybe 8 or 9, and they walled off. And so they're adults now and they're still walled off. So they can't have the intimate relationships they long for. That's a missing ingredient. And we've got to understand with each of these things, these aren't excuses for men. It's not, oh, this happened when I was a child. That's why I am the way I am. That's true, but that's not an excuse. That's as a reality. And what we have to do with reality is we got to deal with it. You can't just say, well, it's no big deal. I was sexually abused, but it's no big deal. No, it was a big deal. If you start looking at pornography at the age of 6, that's a big deal. And you need to deal with that. All these areas, and there's even areas we didn't get listed. Some men have other traumatic events happen in their life. And what you have to understand, each of these events, again, are not an excuse, but what they did was they caused that boy to miss something. There's ingredients that are missing in his life as he tries to mature. It's just like a man who tries to bake a cake without flour. That's a problem. It's not going to work. You got to have flour to bake a cake. Well, there's flourless cakes. Yeah, and how many people eat those? Not many. People want a cake with flour. They're just better. In your life as a man, you may be missing some ingredients that you need. You need to grab a hold of those. You need to put them back into your life. Now, some guys, it doesn't show up because of one of those things, but they've developed a really strong sense of insecurity. A lot of young men today are just insecure about who they are, how they live, and it manifests in all kinds of ways. You see guys who pull back and back off from society. You see guys who go hyper male and try to prove who they are. And they try to motivate themselves to be the man, but it's all to fill that insecure void. And a lot of these guys live their life with this acceptance at all cost attitude. I just want to be accepted. I want people to accept me in everything that I do. And you see men who actually can get controlled by other men because of that. If you want acceptance, you have to do these things to join our crowd. That's like gangs and cliques and things like that. And some guys are so insecure, they'll do that to be accepted. We've seen guys who get controlled by women. Women will kind of bring him around by the nose. And the reason the guy stays with her is because he's afraid of losing her, because he's so insecure. He wants the woman to accept him. Some women will play on that. And some men, that's how they live their life. And this insecurity keeps the man from really developing his own opinion, his own attitude. He becomes a master of wearing a mask. And that insecurity is an ingredient that's missing in a lot of men. And that they're missing security. They're insecure. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they think. So they're missing that security they need to step up and be a man. So a lot of them back off, or a lot of them follow other people. And men were designed to stand up for what's right, to stand up for their family, to stand up for good. But if they're insecure, they're going to back off. They're not going to say anything. So a lot of guys are having these struggles in their life as men, and they don't even realize it. They don't realize they're missing something. They need to check their ingredient label. What happened in their life? What's going on with them? Why are they the way they are? And what this does is it gives them direction. It doesn't give them an excuse. It gives them a direction. Oh, okay, I got to work on this. This happened in my life. It's pretty crappy, and I need to deal with it and not ignore it. Let me deal with it, get over it, and become the strong man I was designed to be. Reason some men never grow up is they have a lack of challenge. They really do. A lot of guys, when they were growing up, were hamstrung as they grew up because a lot of things were done for them, and they were never challenged as men. And this hurt a lot of men because they grew up without that mental and emotional muscle that men develop when they're challenged, when men are forced to overcome things, to learn how to do something they've never done. When they mess up, all those things work to make men more mature. Now, I don't think parents did this on purpose, but I think so many parents of the last 50 years were so focused on protection that they stunted their child's growth. Protection kind of became a prison for a lot of men. You know, in prison, you get 3 meals, you have a time you do stuff, everything's done for you, but you're in prison. It's not the best place to be. A lot of kids grew up in the safety of a prison. Everything was done for them, so they didn't really learn anything. They just learned where to go and what to do there because someone told them to. Now, this doesn't mean parents can teach everything. That's just impossible. And a lot of things men learn, they learn in a situation and dealing with things outside of their comfort zone when they were young. But a lot of parents never put their kids in a place to where they could mess up, in a place where somebody holds them accountable. You know, we have the term helicopter parenting. And the reason we have that term is because a lot of parents are hovering around their children like a helicopter, making sure their kids do this, making sure their kids do that, fighting for their kids. And they never put their kids in a place where the kids got to step up on their own, because that helps the kid learn how to do things. Yes, it's scary, but it's where your kids can develop who they are. I worked with teenagers for 30 years, and one of the things we did is we would take teenagers on missions trips. And these are teenagers from the United States who basically have a wealthy life compared to most of the world. But a lot of times when you take them to a third world country and they experience real poverty, they experience what life is like in some of these countries, it gives them a great view of life. It helps them to see what they need to do. It helps them to think outside of themselves. They live less selfishly, and it's a great thing for them. I had some parents who would never let their kids go on a missions trip. They didn't want them to go because they didn't feel like it would be safe. Why? Because they weren't there. Because they wanted to be there for their kids all the time. Well, that's not healthy for their kids. How are their kids going to experience something? How are their kids going to be challenged if they never do the challenging themselves? And a lot of men today grew up with no responsibility, so they don't know how to take responsibility. They don't know what to do. A lot of guys live with an attitude of, hey, things will just work out. And I understand that. You may be more of a laid-back personality and things may work out, but a lot of men use that as an excuse to run away from their own responsibility. Not everything works out. And some things we have to drive. Men have to be the drivers, which means men have to take responsibility. And it starts with men taking responsibility for themselves. But a lot of time, men were never challenged. Men were never told, hey, you got to suck it up and do it. And so they don't know how. And a lot of these guys were shielded from consequences when they were kids. And that's a dangerous thing. I'm not saying you should let your kids be in dangerous situations or things like that. But when a man grows up and he was shielded from consequences, and then he gets into real life where there are consequences, that's a rude awakening. And these guys learn, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. And a lot of guys just back off. They don't say, okay, I need to learn this. They just back off and they start blaming. They start complaining. And what they do to choose whether they're going to learn or not, that makes all the difference in the world. What if parents didn't hide their boys from challenges at a young age, but they put them in situations, age-appropriate situations, to challenge them, to push them, to let their child see, I can do more than I think. It's amazing to me how many guys you look at today who are millionaires, billionaires, they run big companies. When they were children, they had paper routes. They had things they had to do. They had responsibility. And what did it do? It taught them a good work ethic that they've applied to the rest of their life. You see, they were challenged at a small age, and they grew up with the strength of that challenge. A lot of boys today, they're never challenged. And these challenges help boys mature to men. So we want to make sure that that happens. Now, maybe in your life, you weren't that challenged. You were hidden from consequences. And so you're having a hard time dealing with life. I'm sorry for that, but you know what? It's time now. And the only person who can challenge you now as a man is you. You've got to challenge yourself. You've got to push yourself. Sometimes you got to kick yourself in the butt and say, let's go. It's time. And then sometimes you just go get help. Go get someone who can help challenge you to make you grow and to be a better man. All right, guys, closing out the show, we got to understand that there are some men who never grew up. The fact is, more men today are acting like children than ever before. We have a problem with so many men who are becoming dads. They're getting married. They're doing all these things, but they don't know how to be a man. And sometimes when you're a little older, you tend to complain about those younger than you. You tend to complain about that. And what's funny is a lot of men do this. We focus on other men and their problems. Why? Because we don't want to think about our problems. We don't want to take responsibility for us. And I want to challenge you. What you need to do as a man is look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and say, where am I missing? Why am I not growing up in this area or that area? What's an area that's really hurting me that I need to begin to overcome? What area am I weak in? What area am I just not good in that I need to get better in so it doesn't hurt me and my family? You see, that's the thing you have to do as a man. You've got to make that happen. You've got to be the one to get to mentoring, get the coaching. You've got to be the one to read books, to grow, to do those things. No one makes a man grow up. A man chooses to grow up. A man chooses to become a real man. You can look back and find some things that were missing in your life. I understand that. But what are you going to do about them? Finding them is one thing. Doing something about them is another. And that's my challenge to you. Don't run away from these issues. Don't run away. Face them. Go after them. Attack them. Be a man and deal with them. Because as you deal with them, then you get the muscle. Then you begin to overcome. And then you help the next generation. And in the whole process, you're going to grow up. You're going to mature and develop into the man you were designed to be.
You've been listening to the Confident Man Podcast. Click subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can connect with David on Facebook and Instagram at David Maxwell. Find resources to help you as a man at theconfidentman.me. That's theconfidentman.me.